This is my introduction to you. My name is Simon, and I've been a relationship coach for the last 5 years. I'm going to share 3 stories that represent moments that have had the biggest impact on my life and have thus become massive motivations for why I'm a relationship coach. It'll also give you an insight to who I am and why I do what I do. So let's start by giving you a bit of background info. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. My mother raised me by herself since I was 2 years old, and I would say I had a really fun childhood. I didn't notice that having a father figure was that important until later into my teenage years. I certainly did learn to get to work at a very young age, learning how to do the laundry by the time I was 8, and starting my own business washing cars by the age of 9 in the neighborhood. I got along with girls very easily. My best friend was a girl. She would invite me to her birthday parties, and in turn I would have all these great connections with girls. But it would just be that. I struggled in the friend zone for many, many years to come. In fact, I didn't have my first girlfriend till I left high school. I had lots of friends, but I couldn't seem to crack the code of turning from a friend into a girlfriend. I would say I was bullied a lot in high school. I struggled a lot with confidence. Wasn't a particularly good student. Fortunately, I found some community in basketball, which I started playing when I was 14. A key male role model for me growing up was my basketball coach, as well as one of my mom's best friends. If it wasn't for these 2 people, I probably wouldn't know how to shave and do a lot of things. Not like shaving is something I often practice. There are many, many moments in my life that have been transformational, you could say, that forever altered my perspective of the world or what's possible for me. I'm going to share 3 of those moments that I would say stand head and shoulders above the rest. I definitely wouldn't be talking to you right now if it wasn't for the power I gained over Huntington's disease. I was very proud to be a kid raised by a single mother for a long, long time. I looked at basketball players in the NBA, so many of them coming from single mothers, thinking, well, if they can do something extraordinary with their life, then I can. So I had a lot of optimism. At the same time, due to my lack of male role models, I pushed a lot of boundaries with my mom. To be honest, I was a total asshole and extremely difficult to deal with. And I think if I did have a father figure around, I certainly wouldn't have been able to get away with some of the things that I did with my mom. I didn't have much of a relationship with my dad, and I was fine with that. To me, he was pretty much a stranger. Felt like a sperm donor to me. When I was 12, I found out that I could change my last name from my dad's last name to my mom's last name. So we figured out the process, and that's what I did. I also requested that I don't have to see him anymore. As part of having mutual custody, I was meant to see him every 2 weeks for the weekend. And I told my mom, I don't want to do that anymore. And as soon as that happened, I rarely saw him. Maybe once a year. That grew into once every few years. And there was a time between 14 and 17 that I hadn't seen him in 3 years. I don't think I missed anything. That being said, he was in town and he asked if I'd like to see a movie. I didn't really have any interest in that, but he was only in town for a short time and he was my dad, so I said yes. When he came to pick me up, late as usual, I had a pretty clear look of annoyance on my face. He drove us to the movie theater, and when we got out and we're walking towards the entrance, I noticed he had a strange walk about him, like he was drunk or tipsy. Freaked me out. It's pretty much all I could think about during the movie. I don't even remember what we watched. I also noticed that he was slurring his words a little bit, like someone who was drunk. And when we got home after the movie, I told my mom, I never want to see that man again. I think he's a drunk or on drugs. She said, he's not. He has what's called Huntington's disease. He's actually had it for a long time, and now his symptoms are starting to show. I never heard of this disease. So I asked my mom, what is it? She said it's like having Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS at the same time. And it's gradually destroying his brain and everything that's connected to it, which, as you can imagine, is everything. Your speech, your movement, how you think, your emotions, all these things start to change. In that moment, I had this massive sense of compassion for my dad. I didn't care whether he lived or died before that. In fact, I wanted him to be in pain. And when I found out he had Huntington's disease and that he was going to be in horrible pain until he died, I was done being mad at him. It seemed really pointless. And in that moment, I forgave him. I actually discovered what real forgiveness is. It's not accepting someone's behavior or even suggesting that it's okay. It's no longer punishing them for it, which in turn is punishing ourselves. It's like the poison we drink and we're waiting for someone else to die. It's affecting us negatively. And so I instantly forgave him, and I felt this massive lightness. Him and I started having conversations that were much more connecting. I was interested in his life. I started saying I love you when we'd say goodbye. Didn't do that for many years before. And I got to know the guy. Fast forward to me being 25. And I have recently gone through some really powerful personal development experiences. In those personal development exercises and coaches that I've worked with, I discovered a power over Huntington's disease. Now, the thing I haven't told you yet is that the child of any parent who has Huntington's disease has a 50% chance of receiving it themselves. It's 100% genetic. Not in the way that cancer or other diseases are. It's like eye color. You're either born with it or you're not. And so I either got my mom's version or my dad's version. Now, I didn't think much about that when I was going to university. It wasn't until I started to think about my career and my long-term future that the idea of getting Huntington's disease would really weigh on me. I started to think, what's the point of anything? What's the point of getting into a relationship? What's the point of getting a job that I love if everything's going to be taken away from me? Now, everything's going to be taken away from all of us at some point, but to me, that feeling was so visceral that it made me depressed. It made me not want to try things. It made me extremely discouraged about the future. Now, if it wasn't for personal development and the incredible coaches I have, again, I would not be talking to you guys right now. I don't know if I'd still be alive. I experienced a coaching exercise in my early 20s where I went from not talking about Huntington's disease, not sharing with anybody, worried that if I tripped, it was a symptom. If I forgot my keys, it was a symptom. Thinking my life was headed for a dead end, to having complete power over the disease, being able to talk about it. I ended up becoming a Huntington's disease youth mentor. I've helped raise tens of thousands of dollars for research. I've donated my spinal fluid, my blood. I participated in multiple studies. There's nothing about Huntington's disease that controls my life anymore. If anything, I use it as an excuse to take risks, to do what I truly want to do. I use it as a reminder that life isn't permanent, and that motivates me to take action when I'm scared. And I tell you, there has been thousands of very scary actions I've taken to be sitting here talking to you right now. Discovering my power over this disease was an extraordinary feeling, like a giant weight lifted off my shoulders. You couldn't have told me that I should just be positive and, don't worry about this thing. It's not affecting you now. I wouldn't have believed you. None of those words would have made a difference to me. I had to discover for myself my own power over this thing. I had to discover that I was projecting this future onto my life so clearly that it was affecting everything I did in the present. This is one of the things we do in my coaching program, is we help people release what they're dragging forward into their future. You can't do this conceptually. No one can tell you how to do it. You have to actually experience it. You have to discover something brand new that for us before was blind. This was one of the biggest blind spots in my life. Now, I wasn't 100% empowered over Huntington's disease because I still hadn't gotten tested for it. So my next big step was to get tested. The reason I didn't is because I was scared of what I would do if it turned out I was positive for the gene. Well, there's quite a long process to get tested. There's psychological evaluations, there's a blood test, there's time to change your mind. So let's fast forward. Picture this, I'm walking through the hospital, practically skipping, so excited thinking, I'm gonna be negative for this disease. The whole time before, I thought for sure I had it. But this was like the first moment I was like, I'm not gonna have it. I'm gonna be free from this thing. So we get to the waiting room. The doctor walks us into their office and asks me one more time, "Would you like to know your results?" I said yes. He said, "Okay, Simon, you have 40 repeats of the genetic marker for Huntington's disease, which means you are positive for the gene. So unless there's a cure or treatment in your lifetime, there's a 100% chance you will get Huntington's disease at some point in your life." When he said this, time stopped for me. I instantly pictured throwing my chair across the room and punching holes in the wall. And then thankfully, due to the incredible training I've received from the amazing coaches in my life, I got out of my head and I got back in that room. And I looked at the doctor, and I looked at my counselor, and I looked at my best friend who was there with me. And I said, okay, this is what there is for me to deal with. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use it to motivate me. I'm going to use it to inspire others. And this is not going to stop me with the quality of life that I want to have. The doctor looked at me like I didn't understand what he was saying. The counselor smiled at me because her and I had worked together for a little while, and she said, "That sounds like something you'd say." And my best friend next to me just gave me a hug. That was more than 10 years ago now. And to tell you, I barely think about this disease. I barely talk about it these days also because I'm so focused on what I'm creating. I'm so focused on my life and my family. I'm so focused on what I want to do. Now, most of us aren't living that way. Most of us are trapped by our thoughts. I didn't even have this disease. Some doctor told me about some repeats on my genetics, but there's no active symptoms. There's nothing currently right now to be worried about. And yet the concerns of the future were affecting everything that I thought was possible for myself. Most of us live that way. Whether you're affected by Huntington's disease or not, we've all got something that we're dragging around that's limiting our future and affecting how we act in the present. And it doesn't have to be that way. From that moment on, I opened myself up to all kinds of new opportunities. I became a kinesiologist. I started traveling the world. I opened up a gym in downtown Vancouver, and success grew rapidly. And it was there where I discovered my desire for relationship coaching. People trusted me a lot in personal training. When I would work with people one-on-one, they would end up sharing so much about their life with me. And I started to notice a lot of people were taking fitness classes and personal training to deal with their insecurities, to get someone to like them, or to even avoid their spouse. I thought, this is not the way to go about these problems. We're dealing with the symptom instead of the source. This began my interest in personal development as a career. I wanted to make a bigger difference than I was already making, but I still wasn't clear on the details. I wasn't clear on how I would go about this. I just knew there was something there. There was a rock for me to look under. It wasn't until I had my next brutal breakup where things got a lot more clear. My wife isn't the only person I've been engaged to. I was engaged to someone else long before I met my wife. Obviously, we broke up. And when we broke up, I thought my world was over. I thought I met the person I was going to be with for the rest of my life. And when I ended, I thought it was literally all down here from there. That my best days are now behind me. I'm someone who needs to have something to look forward to. And when I don't, I turn into a mess. So I started eating like crap. I stopped leaving the house very much. I struggled to get out of bed. I was certainly a pain in the ass to talk to, bringing everybody into my pity party. And I figured there's no way I could love anybody else ever again. After locking myself in my house for quite some time and binge watching many TV series, I kept feeling worse and worse and worse. And one day it got so bad that for the first time in my life, I actually contemplated suicide. I've cared about love since as long as I can remember. And this picture that it was all downhill from here and I could never have the love that I want made it seem pointless to keep living. I was in so much mental pain that the logical solution seemed I should kill myself. Now, I knew I didn't actually want to do that. And I don't think anyone actually wants to kill themselves. People only turn to it because the pain they're in right now feels so brutal that seems like the best solution. That's the only way they see they could end this pain. That's how I felt. So I called someone I deeply trust. I told them I was feeling this way. And they said, go to the hospital. Check yourself in, get the support you need. At this point, my mind was poisoning me. My thoughts had me under a spell, it felt like. Well, I went to this hospital, told them how I felt, and they didn't really help people in that situation at the hospital, so they sent me somewhere else to talk to a nurse, a mental health nurse, I think it was. And I talked to her for about an hour. I think I just shared and shared and shared and shared, and she kept asking, anything else? Anything else? Anything else? And it was so wonderful. I just dumped on her. Now, this was a short-term solution, but I started to feel a little bit of ease, which meant, okay, maybe this isn't the end of everything. And she recommended a therapist for me. I went and saw a therapist. Started to get my head above water. And once I felt like my head was above water and I had a little bit of stability, I sought out a relationship coach. This was the beginning of seeing this world of relationship coaches. I didn't know this thing existed. I thought you just go through a breakup, suffer, and then try to get over it by meeting someone else. Try to replace the person you lost with someone better. I had no idea I was just dragging around my unhealthy habits from one person to the next, trying to fix whoever was the next person to fit in the way that I think they should be. This relationship coach helped me discover that I was the common denominator in all my relationships. And man, was that a brick to the side of the head. Because the immediate thought was, if they're not the ones to blame, then I'm the one to blame. And that hurt like hell. That wasn't what the relationship coach was trying to teach me. What he was doing was helping me take blame out of the equation. That it's not my fault and it's not their fault. However, I'm the only one that's been in all these relationships. And they've all turned out the way that they have turned out. So perhaps I have more influence than it seems. And this is where I started to discover how powerful I could be, how influential I could be on my connections. And I started to date in a whole new way. I started to communicate with intention. I started to catch myself going into old habits and showing up in a new way, a brave, courageous, loving, secure way. And lo and behold, I started to have new kinds of relationships, not just romantically, but at work, my family. And at this point, I was fascinated with relationship coaching. I was so excited that I could get unstuck, that this person helped me get unstuck in so many ways that I didn't even know I was stuck. So when I was working as a personal trainer, a kinesiologist, and I saw all these people sharing with me important details about their life and things not changing, I was like, I think I'm done with personal training. I think I need to become a relationship coach. Now, again, I didn't really know where to begin. I just knew that it was amazing. I knew that it made a huge difference for me, but there was still so much unclear. And I was quite nervous and scared to even say that this was my desire, because it's pretty out there. You know, it certainly was out there 5 years ago. Nowadays, it seems like everybody's a coach. About 5 years ago, it was a pretty scary thing to say, because it didn't seem like a real job to most people. And a lot of people still had a lot of skepticism about coaching, about personal development even, thinking that it's just people talking about their problems. It's so much more than that. So when I finally built up the courage to actually say I wanted to become a relationship coach, which was a monumental step for me, to actually speak it out loud, I reached out to as many people I admired online as possible who were doing work something similar like that. Whether it was people I liked their posts, or I've taken their course, or I've worked with a coach, and I asked how they got started. And what I discovered is the best way to start for me, the way that had integrity for me, was to coach people for free, to try on exercises with them that I've experienced, and to see if I'm any good at it. Because it's one thing to have a dream, it's another thing to actually measure our success in that dream. So I started to share online that I was opening up spots to work with people for free in exchange for testimonials. That was the beginning. I think my goal was to do that with 3 people. I ended up doing it with 10 or 12. Everyone gave me a great testimonial, and some of those people asked me if they could work with me and actually be my client. This was the most exciting experience for me, because I was like, oh my God, I can actually make a difference for people in a short amount of time. And they want to work with me. They trust me. And that began my journey. Now, over the years, I've enhanced my skills. I've gone on retreats and worked with better and better coaches. I've designed 3 courses now, created an upgraded version. Last year, I went from one-on-one coaching to leading group coaching, working with communities, and I even have a team of coaches that work with me. I would say the foundational reason I do this is because I believe in family. I believe in long-term love. And I think connection is the most important thing for human beings. I think almost every bit of suffering that we go through is diminished through connection. The quality of life that's possible for us when we release the past that we've been dragging around and have the courage to create a new future is extraordinary. And my goal is to help thousands and thousands of people with exactly that. That the life that you've had doesn't have to be the life that you're going to have. That we can create something brand new together. And I will be forever training myself on how good I can be at helping people with exactly that. And I love it. I mean, this is a dream profession for me. I would argue I'm living my dream life in a lot of ways with my wife and my son. I didn't think these things would be possible for me. If it wasn't for coaching, I never would have met my wife. I never would have had the courage to go up to her. I definitely wouldn't have learned how to fight and communicate in a healthy relationship. I definitely wouldn't be the kind of father that I am. There's just so many important skills that I've developed through relationship coaching that have become the keys to everything I get to experience. And I'm committed to training as many people as possible in these skills. If I could give you the most basic thing that I do this work for, is I'm on a mission to empower people in any situation. That means there isn't a single situation in life where you have to feel stuck or disempowered. Because no matter what we're going through, there is a new way.